Hi guys. Yep, I'm here. I'm at the ocean. Can you hear the ocean waves come in? How cool is that? And it's amazing when you're next to the ocean and you're raised next to the ocean. You know, I could go on ocean walks and there's all kinds of people here enjoying the ocean. So here we are, and it could be a sea. And it's kind of neat because today in your lesson 23, we're going to be talking about the Mediterranean Sea. And it's probably similar to a place like this. This is Santa Cruz, Monterey Bay. But when I was thinking, it made me really think about living by the water. Well, back many years ago, living by the water was very popular. In fact, most of the big seaports became big areas of trade. Well, let's talk about the Mediterranean Sea, and you can look at that on your map. It was called the Great Sea, which was the Great Green Sea because it's kind of greenish, but it's different parts of it are cooler, but most of it is pretty warm. And it's the Mediterranean means the middle of the earth. The middle because it bordered some big areas of land, because it borders Europe and Asia and Africa all together. You can look on your map and see that. And you can see those three peninsulas. The Italian peninsula looks like a boot, and the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain, and then we know where Greece is, the Balkan Peninsula, and we studied those. And then you can also see the way into Asia, all the way to as you go to where Israel is. So all these countries that we're talking about in these ancient areas, even Egypt, bordered into this Mediterranean Sea. And this area had also frequent volcanoes and earthquakes all together. It was probably about, the Mediterranean is about 2,500 miles long and 500 miles wide, and it's deep, very deep in certain parts, so 1,728 feet more than that. There's one area that was called Calypso that's so deep that they would want to not to even go underneath the water in that area, because there were a lot of buried ships and stuff. Well, the rivers that flow into the Mediterranean, look on your map, and you'll see from Africa, of course, we studied that, the Nile River, and it flows from south to north in the delta there. From Africa, the Rhone River in France, and we have these Italian rivers, borders, and then the borders on the Black Sea. And then you stay right at the beginning. You always know, and sometimes you get this landmark, a cool landmark that you can remember. I went for a walk and I had to find a landmark so I could find out where in the world that I come back to where I'm staying. Well, it's really important to find these landmarks. Well, there's a big landmark that you would know that would remind you of that you were entering into the Mediterranean Sea, from the Atlantic Ocean. And this landmark was called the Strait of Gibraltar. And it was called Gibraltar means it's there, always there, so that we could find this landmark. And they would have that in the Mediterranean Sea. Then we have the Strait of Sicily there as you look. Well, what about the climate, though? The climate was good in certain areas. They would get lots and lots of water, like 100 inches a year, which is quite a bit. But there are other areas in Sahara Africa in the desert would only get 10 inches. So a wide variety of plant life in all of those different kind of areas. In certain areas you'd get grapes and citrus and fruits and olives, and the areas where they make cork, and there's 400 species of fish. Look in your book and you see those pictures of the Mediterranean and how, wide variety of plants and animals lived in this area. So as we're talking about lesson 23, it goes into the seafaring people. Seafaring people meant their life was on the sea. This morning I saw some boats on the here in the ocean, and I saw some guys fishing, and you wonder, some people made their life by the sea. And of course, that would be a lot of fishermen would, but the sea was also an amazing place to trade goods back then. They didn't have, airplanes and such that we have. And so these ancient seafaring people became very popular. And the big there's two, actually seafaring people, there was two great groups of people that would make all these huge ships, and they'd trade into these harbors. And some of these harbors became some of the biggest trade areas that the Mediterranean Sea has ever known. Two of these ancient peoples, which are not around anymore, one of these people was called the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians had a great civilization because of their boats. And they think that the people, they thought they really came from the Mycenaeans. Remember when we studied them from the Peloponnese Peninsula? They weren't sure where these Phoenicians actually originated, but nowadays we find they did not originate from the Middle East, but more towards Europe now, more European influence. But these Phoenicians came from the seafaring, and they set up some big cities. One of the big cities was Tyre. I have to talk about Tyre a little bit more because I just investigated. And do you know, when you investigate into the Bible and you find, I looked up Tyre, and it was all over the Bible. Tyre was a great city during the ancient times of some of the great prophets, including Jeremiah, Ezekiel, but even back to Joshua, that Tyre is mentioned, and also Isaiah. They all knew about Tyre and this huge city, and this Tyre city was so magnificent. And they had these two cities that were together, that Tyre and Sidon, and they were together, and they became such big export-import places. And they would import and export all kinds of goods you could imagine. I was looking in the Bible, and the Bible even mentions the goods of Tyre. Can you believe that? It said Tyre was perfect in beauty. And this isn't from the Bible, in Ezekiel. It bordered in the midst of the seas. They brought in the cedars of Lebanon for their coasts, and ivory, and their boats were the most magnificent boats. They had their pilots, or their captains. They were wise men, and they brought them in, and the ships would come from Persia, Lydia, Libya. Their army would come from all different. They bring their army in from all different countries, and they'd settle in this area. They traded things like silver and gold and jewels and lead and iron and bronze and ivory tusks and emeralds and fine linens and rubies, wheat, honey, oil, and balm from Judah, from Damascus. Some beautiful products that come in from Damascus, the blue and white products, and these things almost all the way from, some of them came almost all the way from China. The princes of Arabia came in with lambs and rams, and they rode on elephants. Can you imagine? All these things where the ships landed in Tyre. But God said in the Bible, Tyre, because your heart is lifted up, and you say that you are God, and that you could do anything that you want, they had their gods, and they said that they were gods, and they rejected the true and living God. In the end, they rejected Israel, and so God brought the judgment. And the judgment was from another country that come in and attack Tyre. Well, this whole destruction was prophesied in the Bible hundreds of years before, down to the exact thing that happened. Exact thing. And the Bible prophesied now Tyre, is going to be a city where the city no more. It's going to be a fisherman's town where they just take nets and catch fish there with nets. No more great, gigantic, beautiful city. And because of that destruction, because of their sin, they even called the princes of Tyre, the kings of Tyre, they related them to Satan because they were so evil in the end. But there was a time in the Bible when Solomon was building his temple that there was a man that came from Tyre. His name was Hiram. And he was actually God used him as the engineer of Solomon's temple. So Tyre throughout, and even Jesus said, as in the time of Tyre and Sodom, or Tyre and Sidon, that if they would have repented, God was merciful and graceful, but they did not repent. And that's what happened. Again, the story. He sent in another group of people through not only Nebuchadnezzar, but also Alexander the Great, and Tyre was destroyed. The great Phoenician, remember Phoenician city of Tyre, no more. The thing is, the Bible is like so accurate in history, and it was prophesied before time. All these details, even who would attack them. Nebuchadnezzar's name is mentioned, and exactly how they would build this isthmus to go out to the Isle of Tyre to bring their army in to destroy it. Oh my goodness. So here we have the Phoenician, beautiful seafaring city of Tyre, and the Phoenicians. I'm going to stop there, and we're going to get into another seafaring that actually came in to the whole land of Israel, the Levant, and they were called the Philistines. Well, they are related to the seafaring people of the Phoenicians. They're almost the same people group, but the Philistines, we know, they were like giants, and they had everything they could imagine, and they were constantly attacking the Israelites. And we'll find, David fought the Philistines many times, and we know who else, Samson fought the Philistines. But let's stop there, because then I'm going to tell you about another Phoenician city that came from Tyre. Tyre was not the only Phoenician city. There was another city called Carthage. And Carthage, again, became this great, gigantic, city because of the merchants and the ships and the seafaring people. And there was excitement there of all kinds. But they didn't seek the true and living God. But as we see, we're going to see more about Carthage in history, as even Carthage is, later on, we'll see how they fare with Julius Caesar, but that's in the future. But isn't it wonderful that we can study? And look at here. I'm right here on the beach. I want to show you. You can barely see because the fog's coming in, and there's no one there, but you can hear the waves hitting. And here I am in this little cavern here to be able to show you guys such a beautiful, beautiful place. I love when the fog comes in, and I love all this because it's just such a freshness. And I hope that I can bring you here sometime maybe too. Wouldn't that be fun?